Welcome to the Larry Kreider's Leadership Podcast. Larry is the author of over 40 books, the founder of Bobb International, a worldwide family of churches and ministries in 6 continents, and has over 50 years of leadership experience. He and his guests will share inspirational leadership insights from their journey with God. These insights, gleaned from serving leaders in many nations, will transform your life and leadership. For more information on Larry's books and resources, visit LarryKreider.com.
Welcome to the Larry Kreider Leadership Podcast. Larry Kreider here today with my long-term friend, Brian Sauder. Welcome back on the podcast.
Thank you. It's so awesome to be here. What an honor to
we're
participate.
Honored to have you.
Yeah, wow.
Today, Brian, this is going to be so exciting. Because today we obviously focus on leadership week after week. And today we want to talk about how to build healthy teams. And there's a lot of tools around to use, and there's one that you're going to talk about. It's my favorite, all-time favorite.
Wow.
It is. And the team profile, we want to talk about that. Before that, this stuff is taught in our school, Bobb Global Leadership School. Tell us about the school. You've led the school for more than 25 years, and it's been helping people all over the world. I mean, a pastor just this week told me, he said, we have 40 people in our church went through that school. It's been life-changing for our church.
Wow. Yeah. That's great.
So tell us about the school, and then we'll get into the profile.
The Bobb Global School has had it's taken different forms over the years, but this last season we have a live campus in New Holland, Pennsylvania, and then a live stream on the web. So we have campuses out at different places. In fact, right now with our current school year, we have a live stream to Cape Town, South Africa. Wow. We have a live stream to Winnipeg, Manitoba.
Wow,
we have
cool.
a live stream in Virginia, Crossroads, Virginia Church there.
Sure.
And so it's really focused on leadership and ministry development. So kind of our backdrop is Ephesians 4, where it talks about some are called to leadership to equip all for ministry. So everybody in the body of Christ is called to minister. And many actually are called to leadership. And so we want to train on those 2 levels. And then we have a total online, on-demand version of the school that anyone can take around the world. We have pastors and leaders in India and Africa, in Europe, and many other places. In Canada and so forth that are doing that totally online. It's the same core content, same curriculum as what we do in our live school and our live stream schools. It's been amazing just to see how it's been helping people every year.
So how do people find out about the school? How do they find out about it?
Well, you can go to it's a page on the Bobb website, and you just go there and click on training and training schools, and then it'll pop up, and it'll show you both of those. We'll find it in the show notes, but it'll show you all 3 aspects. If you're from outside of the U.S. and you want to do it live. In fact, recently we've had churches take a group of people through the online school together. So think about this. There's like 20 people from a church in New Jersey, and they are going to all do the online school individually together. And so they're meeting every month to review what they're learning.
So individually, anytime during the day for themselves personally?
Yeah, they can binge and do it all night long or after on their break at work and whatnot.
And how do they meet together? What's that look like?
Well, they come together at the church at a conference room or at wherever, somebody's house. And then there's 9 learning paths in the online school, and they usually meet once for each learning path. And they discuss what they're learning, they ask questions and discuss. So it's like a classroom doing it together, but they actually do it online at their own convenience.
Yeah, I have pastors who at our nation and the nation's talking about that right now, doing that, because I love that concept. It's a great concept. It's really just caught on in popularity, and it really works, allows people's schedules to be flexible to get it done. Yeah. When people get trained together, it just helps leaders so much build healthy teams, because people are making decisions the same way. They're following biblical concepts, principles, learning together. It's just a powerful thing. So thank you. And thanks for your faithful leadership for all these years in the school. And now it's at a place where it's changing lives all over the world, and we're so grateful.
Yeah, it's been a real blessing and a real rewarding experience for me to be able to do that. Yeah.
So check out the show notes. All that's on the show notes, all the information about that. Let's get into our focus topic for today, the team profile, or the role preference inventory, or whatever you want to call it.
Talk to me about that. Again, I love this. I mean, I've done disc, I've done 360s, I've done all this stuff, and they're all great. But this is my favorite. This helped me the most over the years. It's amazing, Brian, but it really has. Talk to us about the history of the team profile.
Wow, that's amazing to hear. I'm totally jazzed as well about the team profile. It's been one of the most helpful things for myself. And we do, like you said, we do it in our training schools. And the team profile was originally designed by a guy named Bobb Biehl.
Yeah.
And he has like this, he's a believer, but he has this kind of consulting business, helping churches, helping businesses, and so forth. And he originally, when it first came out, would have been in the 80s. And Bobb Biehl came up with, he observed that every project has like 3 parts of it. And that would be the design part, the develop part, and then the manage part, or the stable part of it. And so that's not rocket science, he would say. In fact, there's a great video on his website. He just explains in 30 minutes like how he came about the whole thing. Very, very helpful. And but he just talked about that and realized that's not a new idea, that a project has different phases to it. But what he discovered was that individuals have a preference for some of those phases. It's a more natural, a sweet spot, that they actually prefer one of those phases. And then he spread it out even further so that there are designers, and then a next category of combined designer developer, and then a next combined category of designer stable, and then the category of stable. So he actually broke each project into 5 phases. And then on top of that, he identified, and that's what the profile does for us, is that it helps us to identify which phase we prefer.
Yes.
So in the beginning, it was called the role preference, and I actually kind of like that a little better, even though team profile is very descriptive because it's a great team builder tool, but because it identifies the role that you prefer. So you can be working on a job in a church or a business, and you can do what you have to do, but this is more designed towards finding the role that you prefer, and where you get the most energy, where you want to go to work in the morning, where you don't want to leave in the afternoon, and where you're really doing what you're created to do. And then on top of those 5 phases, he also developed 3 different levels. There's the presidential level, the vice president level, and the strong player. And then within the phases, there you have also one of those levels, and then it really helps to identify who you are and what is your best, to look at it this way, best producing, best functioning role. So it's all about getting the round peg in the round hole. Like that's why it's such a good team builder.
Yeah, it's awesome. Brian, I have a confession to make. I've been involved in leadership now 50-some years. And when I was a younger leader, I really thought everybody felt like me, thought like me, preferred what I preferred.
Gotcha.
And I realized how wrong I was, and how much then I needed desperately people around me on the teams that I've led who are different than me, have different role preferences. And it was life. That's why this was so life changing for me. Can you find this in the Bible? Like the phases, for example.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it doesn't have chapter and verse like, okay, here's this and so forth. But what we do, as what Bobb discovered, we look in the Bible and we find in the Bible, like David was the designer, like he designed the temple and the worship patterns. He wrote that out, but he never developed it. He never built the temple. And so there's our designer. And we have Nehemiah over in Nehemiah chapter 2, 3, and 4, where Nehemiah planned and oversaw the rebuilding of Jerusalem. So he planned it, but he also developed. Like he did it. He had to see it work with his hands. And that's that sweet spot for that designer developer. They want to do it one time and get the thing done. And then they're done. We'll maybe talk some more about that. Then a developer would be a great example in the Bible of a developer. Developers would be the disciples who followed Jesus' pattern of ministry. That's true. They took what he said, go and preach the gospel and heal the sick and, cast out devils. They took that and they did all kinds of different miracles and signs and wonders and walked on water, and all these kind of different things. They developed the basic concepts that Jesus gave them in many, many different ways. We read that all through the Gospels and all through the New Testament. The developer stable, a good example in the Bible would be Gideon, who followed God's instructions to defeat the Midianites. Like, there was instructions that were given specifically for that, and he followed through that developer stable. And so it wasn't necessarily a new idea. It was instructions that God gave before, how to beat the Midianites and the Philistines and so forth. We find that in Judges 6 and 7. And then probably just the stable phase would we kind of get this where Jethro tells Moses to delegate.
That's
like
good.
He goes, hey, we need to rule and lead Israel for a long time. So we got to figure out a way to do it that builds stability. You can't do it all yourself. You got to set up these guys who can take the mantle and help the people resolve conflict and judge everything. And so we actually do find these 5 phases that Bobb Biehl identified. So sorry, Bob, you didn't. They're not original to you. They're actually original to God.
Exactly.
They're in the Bible, right?
Exactly. So when you look at these 5 phases, and like the first phase, the designer is somebody that basically has the ideas. They probably do not implement it. Is that correct?
Correct. Like, for a designer, the project is done after they have to come up with the idea.
Okay.
Like, they don't even have to see it done one time. So there's a terminology that we use to kind of help you decide which one of the phases you are. And so what we find is get in your mind in an area of confidence and competence, something that you've never seen before. What is your role that you would prefer? So kind of on a blank sheet of paper, a pure designer would be the person who just comes up with the idea and throws the paper aside and hands it off to the next person. That's a pure designer. The designer developer has the idea, but they have to see it work one time. They have to see that developed, and the developer, the pure developer, they have seen something done one time, and now they're going to maximize it. Like, why reinvent the wheel? I saw it happen one time, so now we're going to put 4 of these on a car. We're going to put 18 of these on a truck, and that's that designer phase. And then designer stable phase is more of a problem solver. They have something that's working now. We're going to tweak that, and then the stable phase is also a kind of a problem solver, but they're more dedicated to the long-term success of the project. So that's the manager who is managing. I like I oftentimes use McDonald's as an example because there's actually a movie about this. It's called The Founder. It's about Ray Kroc, who's played by Michael Keaton, and it shows how the McDonald's brothers invented this idea of a fast food burger, and then Ray Kroc came along and duplicated and so forth, and developed it and turned it into it's really a real estate empire, because all the restaurants are owned by McDonald's Corporation. So McDonald's Corporation owns the highest, most valued real estate around the world because they own the real estate. It's quite amazing. And that was part of Ray Kroc's contribution. But then the business is locally owned, and then each McDonald's needs a manager that's going to work there for 10 years, 20 years. They're going to, like, the design is pretty much done with McDonald's. There's a burger, and a few months later it comes out looking a little different with a different name. Then, 6 months later it goes back to the original. So there's not a lot of design left in McDonald's, but it's in that stable phase. And that person that'll work there for 20 years, be the shift manager. The employees love them. They make money, and they solve problems a little bit differently.
I never thought of this till now, but I wonder if some cultures, people in certain cultures would be emphasizing different areas. For example, I have a friend from China who told me once, he said, he's a Christian leader. He said, you guys in America, he said, you guys design all this stuff and come up with all this stuff. He said, but we take it and we make it better and we make it cheaper. He said, we really make it happen. So that may even be an example of that even in different cultures.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that I agree that is at least partially true, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, these 3 levels you talked about, go over that again. That's so powerful, so important.
Sure. The levels, and there's a little tool in the team profile where you go through and decide for yourself. So the team profile, we have them here at Dove, but I mean, you can buy them online for about $10. It's very self-explanatory. And so you can do it. You can buy one and go through it yourself, or you can have somebody come and present it to your whole leadership team. We just had a church in Canada
to buy 25 of these.
Wow.
They're taking every leader and potential leader in the whole church through it.
Wow.
And so I was just helping like the leaders themselves do it, but then they're going to take everybody through. And in fact, but next week I'm doing presenting for a local business for like 10 or 12 of their employees, just presenting these concepts. So they're having somebody from the outside come and do it.
So if somebody would want someone to come in and do this for them in their business, in their church, in their ministry, you'd be willing to do that?
Yeah, sure. I do that. And
sure.
And I did it for a local ministerium here a couple weeks ago.
Sure.
And then, but you can do it yourself too in the concepts, but for a team building tool, it can be good to have somebody from the outside. So to answer your question, the different levels, the level number one is a presidential captain, and that is the person in charge of everything.
Right.
And literally the term is like when the pressure is on and the crowd is going to cheer or jeer at your success.
Yeah.
Are you willing and ready to make the decision? That's the presidential captain. And it's interesting, but not that many people really want to be the presidential captain.
A lot of pressure.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure. And but that's the presidential captain. And the next level is the middle captain. And that's kind of like your shift manager, your division head, that next level of leadership. They're in level of leadership. They're more of a number two person. They don't really, at the end of the day, they don't want the buck to have to stop with them.
Right.
They enjoy leading a team, but not necessarily being in charge of everything. And then the strong player definitely is not in charge of everything, but they are respected, they give input, and they just make the thing work. And so we have 5 phases, and then we have 3 levels, the presidential level, the vice presidential level, or middle captain, I should say. There's different terms, and also the strong player. And so what we find is that as people go through this instrument, the team profile, they find not only their role preference, but also their level, and that helps them really see, like you find out, like which of these people would not be a parachute jumper, okay?
Right.
But it's not going to be the stable person down here who is a strong player. Like, no, it's going to be somebody out there, a designer, developer, who's going to do this once and whatnot. Or which of these persons is going to be a routine accountant doing budgets and doing books every day? Well, that's going to be like a strong player in the stable phase. And so, in fact, Bobb Biehl is fond of saying, like, when I find out your team profile and your level, I can predict 40,000 things about you.
Wow.
And you're like, what does that mean? How does he know so much about me? And he's really just talking about like the dictionary of occupational titles. And he's saying like there's probably for each phase and for each level, there's like 40,000 job titles that they would really be a good fit for. So, and it's about what you prefer.
Sure.
It's your sweet spot. It's where, we use the term getting the right people on the bus, which is a term that comes from Good to Great.
It does.
With Jim Collins. Getting the right people on the bus and in the right seat on the bus.
Right.
And I was just, like I mentioned a few weeks ago, I was talking to a local ministerium here, and this would be 2022. The Philadelphia Phillies made it all the way to the World Series. They had the highest payroll of any team in Major League Baseball. They were paying more than everything than any other team in the league for their players, and they had amazing home run hitters, but they didn't have pitchers. And they ended up, they won a couple games in the World Series, but then pitching took over, and the opposition team, and we live near Philadelphia, so that's why it's real to me.
Sure.
But in the 2022 World Series, the Phillies lost because they didn't have pitchers. They didn't have the right people on the team. They spent all this money to get hitters, but at the end of the day, the World Series was won by the team that had better pitching, because the pitching overruled the hitting. And like I like that term, like let's get the right people on the bus.
I love it too.
And get them to the right seat on the bus as well.
Now, would there be times that you might be a presidential captain in one setting and you might be a team player in another setting?
Yeah, and there certainly is. And that really comes back to your preference. Like we can all work in titles that are not necessarily, or positions or roles that are not necessarily our favorite.
Right.
But our preference, it would be to find long-term that role that is our sweet spot. So we kind of find, and this is information just coming right from the team profile, we find the real you, like what you're good at, what your desires are. And it's great because others know what to expect of you when you get into that spot. And so you find a sense of personal fulfillment that is long-term and that you won't achieve if you're in a non-preferred role. And and we find self-acceptance, like it's okay to be me.
Like this is me. Like for myself, I'm a designer developer. So I've found over the years that like every 1 or 2 years, like I need a new project. I'm okay managing and developing what I already have. But every 1 or 2 years, I find that I need a new project, and that's just how I'm made. And I'm ready to take something new on, climb a new mountain, learn, research a new item, and implement and build it. Like the school was a part of that. Like, hey, we've been doing the school for a number of years. Let's build an online school now, and let's research that. In fact, that was like my master's program, my graduation, my culminating project was designing and building that online school, and it's like where I have where you have natural energy. And the other thing I would say is it's easier to say no when you're looking at yourself or other people in your organization. It's a manager might say, oh no, that's not really you. It's easier to say no, let's not put that. But the person might have an opportunity. We all have opportunities coming our way, and we might say, no, that's not really me. I don't want to take that opportunity, even though it might be a promotion or it might be a change or whatnot. And we found that it also leads to a greater harmony in the workplace, in families, and it's really about getting the right person in the right position. It reduces turnover in a business or a church or ministry, and it reduces burnout as well.
Speaking of burnout, is there a burnout level?
Yeah, and there's an aspect of the team profile that has to do specifically with burnout, and really it has to do with the phase that you're in. So the designer, like they're burned out after they have the idea and if they have to implement it, they lose grace. Like they're burned out. Like just after having the idea, they're ready to hand it off to the next person and think about solving another problem. So really, there's not that many of those people in the world, but so the designer developer, their level of burnout is after they've seen it done one time, or like Bob Biehl's fond of saying, when the project is 7/8 done. Like they're done. Like they're already thinking about the next thing. So they came up with the idea, and now I have this engine. It's a new kind of engine, and it's working. And now I'm thinking already, here's, about designing a spaceship or something else. They've burned out and lost. The developer, which is more some of my area, designer, developer, they would tend to burn out after 2 years. Like there is a time frame where if they don't get something new to work on every 2 years. So think about the value of that person to your organization. You have a growing organization, so you always have that person that's taking on these new projects. Like, oh, we want to start we have a great market in the U.S., but now we want to start a market in Canada or in Europe, or you always looking for that person who's a developer that's going to arm wrestle that thing into existence for the next 2 years. Now, developer stable, they would tend to be more a 4-year window, and they burn out after 4 years. And the stable phase, they if they're in the right place, like they'll manage McDonald's for 20 years or 30 years, and they'll just be as happy as a lark and just be keep doing that over and so there is. But that same stable person would burn out if they had to create the new marketing campaign for McDonald's. They'd be like toast. Like they couldn't do it. They just wouldn't perform well in it at all. And so like there's different things that would cause burnout. And like if that designer had to do his idea, then he would burn out. But if the stable person had to design something, he or she would burn out as well. It's entirely gender neutral. Men and women over all different levels, over all different phases as well.
I love it. I mean, as I said in the beginning of the podcast, it's my favorite profile. It's helped me personally so much over many years. And what about honor words? Are there honor words for each phase?
Yeah. We find that for each phase, there are honor words as well. So that would be like if you're at a dinner where they're honoring guests at the dinner, what word would you like to hear about yourself? So that word for the designer, that word would be brilliant. Like you are brilliant. You have great ideas, and that has to do with that design phase. That is what would feed them and honor them. For the designer developer, we like to use the word wise. Like you are a wise person, and you have been able to not just take that, come up with an idea, but you've been able to make it work. And the honor word for the developer is courageous.
So now you have taken something you saw one time and you have set up the assembly line now, and we're making this thing, making it work. So you took the courage which they all include some level of risk, right?
Sure.
And the developer stable has the honor word faithful. So, and the stable has the word loyal with it. So I'm going to just explain that just a bit here, because the designer thinks it, the designer developer tries it, the developer sets goals and meets those goals, and the designer stable and the stable are problem solvers.
Wow!
So they are adapters. They're adapting. They call it adapting samples. So we find the designer stable and stable are all good at adaptive samples, using something else that's been done before and growing. But then the designer stable and the stable are problem solving. There's two kind of problem solvers, and they kind of go back to these honor words. The developer stable, their honor word is faithful, and they're faithful to the task, solving the problem. Whereas the stable phase, their honor word is loyal, because they're faithful to the people. So there's two different words, and that's the different distinction. And so in the develop stable phase and the stable phase, we call them problem solvers. In fact, Bobb Biehl wrote a book just about that, and and the title of the book is "Stop Setting Goals If You Would Rather Solve Problems." Wow! And I remember when I was elected to our local school board, I gave this book to our superintendent because I saw that it would help her, because she was driven by goals, and yet she really functioned much better when she had a situation just to get in the middle of and solve. But everybody else wanted her to set goals. The Department of Education wanted her to set goals. The local teachers, everybody wanted her to set goals. But she was much better at problem solving and getting in the weeds and solving this and so forth. And so the context of this book is that you can be a great leader of a company, a church, or an organization, and still just be a problem solver. You don't have to be a goal setter, which a lot of people find really releasing and really, really freeing as well. So we especially find that in the developer stable and the stable, like the McDonald's Corporation, there's not a lot of change happening now. So the next problem to solve might be, we want to expand our market from the U.S. to Canada. So that it could be a goal, but if you take it on as a problem to solve, then that gives energy to that person, and so it makes them function well and perform well, and gives them joy. At the end of the day.
Got this question for you, Brian. What do you do? You talk about the three levels: the presidential captains, the middle captain, and the strong team players. What do you do if you're on a team and you are a presidential captain, but let's say there's two or three presidential captains on that team? And often then there's conflict.
Yes.
So what do you recommend?
Well, I think we're looking for the role preference. So you want to look for the long-term role of long-term success of the organization. So over time, you would want to find, like we use the term sometimes, a different mountain for each of those presidential captains to own. So it could be a mountain underneath the main mountain, or it could be their own, maybe as a parallel company in the same organization and so forth. But over time, if those people have character, they can work together for a long time. But you're really not maximizing all that God made them to be to your organization, whether they're pastors or business leaders or non-leaders in a nonprofit. You're really not maximizing all of their potential to the earth, the kingdom of God, and the possibility, whether it's business or a nonprofit.
Something I've seen over the years is if you have like designer developers, a few of those on a team, and they're presidential captains also, that it'll work if there's an opportunity somewhere in every person's life to lead something. To have their own anthill, I've heard it said already, to lead something. And then they can work under another leader on a team. It works fine, as long as they have something somewhere.
Something they can own.
They're championing.
Yeah, and
have
be a champion for. Yeah, totally. I would totally concur. I mean, and we talk about this with church planning as well. That, when we're church planning, like a spiritual son might be happy to be raised up and be the youth pastor for a period of time or be an associate pastor over a period of time. But if they're
really a presidential captain, over time, like, hey, there's a great potential church planter to send out to start a new church and give that person his own anthill or her own anthill or her own, mountain or whatever you want to call it. And so it really has a lot of dynamics with parallels into servant leadership, raising up, training and releasing and so delegating to people. Yeah. And it happens a lot of times on a local level first before it goes out to, like, when we're talking about church planting, if somebody wants to plant a church and but they've never led a small group. Like, okay, well, let's back up here a little bit, and hey, why don't you and your wife start a small group?
Give them a path. Give them a process.
Start a small group, and then raise up a leader, and start a second group, and multiply that, and then if you can do that micro multiplication, then you really might have potential to multiply out and start another church.
We've often said there should never be church splits in the kingdom, but lots of church multiplications.
Yeah,
and church multiplications when you set up a path for someone and help them achieve that goal that God's placed in their hearts. Brian, this has been amazing. We're out of time. Any last minute thoughts you have before we close down today? Again, check out the show notes, all this information about Bobb Biehl, Role Preference Inventory, the Double Leadership Ministry School, Global School. All this is on the show notes. Anything else you'd like to say in closing?
Well, I just want to say that this has been very helpful. Whenever we teach this in any of our schools, like, we just get incredible feedback, and we want I love the fact that it allows you to be who God created you to be.
Yes.
And as a leader of an organization, it allows you as a servant leader to help everybody in the organization be who God created them to be.
That's right.
It's not about hiring or firing. It's more about helping people maximize their potential. And if you're leading an organization and even if they're like whatever, it's real estate, it's all your salespeople are maximized, and released, then that benefits you comes back and benefits you, because it just lifts you as all of your employees or your team are maximized. Then it just lifts you as well.
Yeah,
and then everybody is, in that place of personal fulfillment. They have self-acceptance. They got a natural energy, and they're empowered to say no when opportunities come along that are not them.
Brian, thank you for being here and just so clearly explaining the Role Preference Inventory. And check out the show notes. And again, a lot of other information that's on there if you want to be involved in the school, learn more about this. In our school, we get into this, even with more, a lot more than we had time here to today. So thank you for joining us today on the Larry Kreider Leadership Podcast. Brian, thank you for being here and just so clearly explaining the Role Preference Inventory. And this is where we learn these small changes we can make in our lives and make a massive difference as we apply them, and not only change our lives, but it will be a blessing to the lives of those whom we serve. God bless.
Thank you for listening to Larry Kreider's Leadership Podcast. If you want more information about any of Larry's books, daily devotionals, small group resources, or any other teachings, go to LarryKreider.com.